Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into the powdered, perfumed cobblestones of 18th century Paris city where lace collars scratch your neck, candles flicker inside every cafe, and somewhere in a narrow alley near the Seine, someone's getting fined for having a mustache that's just a little too wide. The air is thick with roasted chestnuts, chimney smoke, and the faint musk of someone's questionable cologne. And hey, post your location and the time where you are. I love knowing who's falling asleep in which corners of the world. Your boots click along uneven stones as you pass men in embroidered waistcoats and women whose wigs could house a sparrow or two. You nod politely at a man twirling his mustache with surgical precision. He stares back, gauging your mustache. It's that kind of place. You, dear traveler, have just arrived. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. But the result was real enough. A draft proposal from the Bureau of Decorative Affairs. A plan to restore visual order to the public face, literally. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Yes, that's a direct translation. Somewhere in the annals of the city archives, filed between sewage tax and pigeon control, there lies a royal ordinance dedicated to mustache metrics. And someone's loudly complaining that his cousin was ticketed for a flagrantly flamboyant mustache. You pass a cafe where an elderly man is ranting that today it's mustaches, tomorrow it'll be earlobe length. His companion, nodding solemnly, dunks a croissant into coffee like it's the last freedom he has left. You think it's a joke until you notice a poster nailed beside a street lamp. Reads, on its flank, another poster flaps in the wind. Poets can petition for expressive width, though most are too busy brooding to file paperwork. She claims his mustache is getting political. He insists it's just a personal style. You suspect they both might be right. And then there are the aristocrats, of course, rumored to have waiver salons in their manners where measurements are more flexible. You trudge past a bakery glowing with warmth, where loaves are shaped like little moons. It's cultural. Mustache was a symbol of class, rebellion, sensuality, even literacy. You see a merchant peddling tiny brushes for edge discipline. Apparently, chaos begins at the corners. Wider styles were linked to poets and philosophers, men who thought too much and smoked even more. His mother yells, "That's not funny anymore." Narrower cuts evoke discipline, order, and a firm belief in napkin folding. Holding what looks like a velvet measuring stick, he is speaking softly to a young soldier whose mustache curls out like the arms of a sleepy cat. Better this than prison, he mutters, adjusting his monocle. There's a brief negotiation, then snip. Just the ends. Offenders shall be measured. Offenders shall be fined. That if they didn't do something, the entire aesthetic order of France might crumble. But inside, you're already wondering how you might look in a slightly narrower style. Paris, after all, was the capital of elegance. Eyebrows were trimmed and wigs powdered precisely. Shouldn't mustaches be contained? By decree of the Ministry of Civility and Public Order, all facial hair must remain within reasonable bounds. A man named Edouard de something or other arrived at Versailles with a glorious, fanned-out mustache so bold, so gravity-deafening, that it apparently distracted several ladies from the king's new fountain unveiling. One noblewoman allegedly swooned up from romance, but from sheer shock. You rub your upper lip. It's not even that bushy. Turns out, this all began with a courtier's complaint. And so the whispers began. That facial hair had become unruly. That symmetry was dying. Historians still argue whether this moment at Versailles actually triggered legislation or whether it was just a barbershop anecdote polished over decades. The draft law, dry and full of legalese, proposed establishing a socially harmonious standard of mustache width to prevent disruptive flamboyance in public spaces. Meanwhile, the city's barbers were quietly thrilled. More trims meant more coin. But not everyone celebrated. You wonder, how would they enforce this? Your question is answered moments later as you witness a peculiar sight: a man in official livery with a feathered cap and a black leather folder. The soldier sighs. You're beginning to realize this isn't just cosmetic. A horse-drawn carriage rattles by, its driver sporting an exquisitely regulated triangle of fuzz. Wax within limits. Public beauty is everyone's duty. You chuckle quietly. There's talk of exemptions. Military men above a certain rank are allegedly allowed an extra centimeter. At a fountain shaped like a cherub holding grapes, a couple argues. In a tavern near the Opera House, someone tells you the Barbers Guild has begun offering new tools: mustache protractors, arch enhancers, and width trainers that look suspiciously like tweezers with ambition. A boy runs past, wearing a fake paper mustache so large it wobbles. The mood is shifting. What began as a funny ordinance is now a small but growing discomfort, an itch beneath the whiskers of Paris. You pass a window with a mannequin head, inside mustached, waxed, pinned with a sign. Beauty obeys. Do you? The candles flicker. Somewhere a violin plays. And beneath it all, you feel something begin to curl, not just hair, but resistance. You duck into a small arcade off Rue des Petites Écuries, where the scent of boiled onions and perfume mingles strangely in the muggy air. Overhead, lanterns swing gently in the night breeze, but your focus is pulled to the hushed group gathering near the bakery window. Anxious men, some with small rulers poking from their breast pockets, others nervously smoothing the ends of their mustaches with trembling fingers. The baker himself, broad-shouldered, flour-dusted, leans on the sill and mutters, "They've passed it." Full approval. The royal razor's edict is law now. Sealed with wax and hung in the salons of judges and hat makers alike, you scan a copy, tacked askew to a damp wooden wall. A collective exhale, somewhere between dread and resignation. You blink. The royal razor's edicta, named both theatrical and terrifying, has moved from gossip to ink. Effective immediately. Facial hair worn upon the upper lip shall not exceed 3 Parisian fingers in horizontal breadth, nor shall it deviate in curl, twirl, or elevation without due cause. Others swear their ancestors were fined for follicular arrogance. Regardless, the city behaves as if it matters. He references an incident from Vienna involving a duel and a waxed curl mistaken for sarcasm. Nobody disputes it because nobody wants to admit they don't understand what that means. The parchment shows mustaches at varying widths, each marked with Latin letters and colored wax stamps. You can just make out a doodle in the margin. A frowning face beside the word "too much." You try to imagine what due cause might include. Duels. His mustache, formerly a proud, swooping crescent, now clings meekly to the edges of his lips. The crowd applauds politely. No riots yet. Wig makers are offering counterbalancing bouffants to offset perceived mustache shrinkage. "How can one express," he cries, "when even my follicles are censored?" His friends console him with warm wine and compliments about his earlobes. Not with gunpowder or banners, but with black market mustache wax and coded fan language exchanged at masquerade balls. He hosts a weekly salon titled "For the Free Follicle," where artists and dissidents recite poetry about freedom and touch up each other's whiskers in candlelight. Authorities pretend not to notice. It's probably because half of them attend. Even glove designers are quietly brainstorming ways to guide men's fingers away from over-twirling in public. Their goal, determine not just the maximum width, but the ideal form, aesthetic code of the upper lip. He sells them for 5 sous apiece and includes a tiny velvet pouch. Fashionable, functional, slightly terrifying. His mustache had pointed upward in what the inspector called a deliberate provocation. Perhaps a late trim. Perhaps a trip to the countryside, where inspectors dare not roam. Or maybe, just maybe, you'll embrace the new style. His mustache now sports a modest curve, calls it the price of love. He is handed a parchment fine, 7 sous, and a pamphlet titled "Refinement Through Restraint." Not just appearances, but how people carry themselves. How much of themselves they're allowed to wear. There's a man in Montmartre who makes wax that shrinks the appearance without trimming. Optical illusion, darling, she winks, revealing 3 gold teeth. The Babylonians had beard codes, he insists. And in ancient Egypt, the wrong sideburns could cost you a camel. You're not sure about either, but the crowd nods solemnly. They debate heatedly over the gentle arc, the subtle saber, and one rogue suggestion called the sovereign tentacle, which receives no support but considerable giggling. Mourning? Some kind of tragic love triangle involving wax? And Parisians do not surrender beauty easily. Historians still argue whether this law was enforced citywide or merely floated as a deterrent. Some say it never had legal teeth. At the Ministry of Civility, a real place. Absurdly enough, You watch through a frosted window as two officials examine a diagram of faces. Inside, a committee of stylists, tailors, and philosophers has been assembled. The Queen's own advisor, an aging dandy with a violet plume, suggests that longer mustaches encourage emotional unrest. You lean against a lamppost as a courier rushes past, pinning smaller flyers to doors. They advertise training courses for the new standards. Shape your stache with state-approved symmetry. Enroll now. Your lips twitch. On the champs, tailors are adjusting shirt collars to frame the narrower mustache look. You wander past the workshop of a man known as the combsmith, a silent artisan who now carves measuring combs inlaid with ivory dots. Each a government-approved benchmark for acceptable mustache length. At the opera house, the lead baritone emerges for curtain call. Back in the Marais, a writer you vaguely recognize from salon readings is weeping into his inkpot. Nearby, a professor gives an impromptu street lecture on the history of facial hair legislation. Still, this is Paris. A woman selling ribbons leans toward you conspiratorially. "You want to keep yours full?" she whispers. You wonder if this is how revolutions begin. One nobleman, Count Beaufort, openly defies the law. But enforcement is real. At the base of Pont Neuf, you see a young man ticketed for angular defiance. Later that night, he's seen at a tavern, regaling friends with the tale. You, meanwhile, are already planning how to dodge the velvet ruler. After all, it's only hair, right? But as you glance at the reflections in shop windows, at the wistful faces trimming just a bit more each day, you sense it. This law has changed something. And in the silence of that thought, a gust of wind scatters a handful of flyers down the cobblestones. You catch one midair. It reads, "Measure not the man by his mustache, but beware the man who measures." You tuck it into your coat and keep walking. Morning arrives in a blur of bakery steam and horse dung. You rub your eyes and squint at a puddle, where a distorted reflection of your face reminds you that, yes, your mustache is still wider than legally encouraged. Officially, it's where complaints about mustache violations are processed. Unofficially, it's become the most begrudged workplace in Paris. There are calipers for side angles, a brass comb with centimeter notches, and a silk pocket square monogrammed MWI. A title no one asked for, responsibility no one wanted. It's not rebellious exactly, just generously optimistic. Across the street, a line of anxious men forms outside the Office of Grooming Compliance, a recently created annex inside the Bureau of Street Sanitation. "Please maintain neutral expression," he murmurs, wielding the ruler with the same reverence a priest might show a chalice. "We measure from outermost whisker edge to outermost." Yes, oh dear. Inside, behind a rickety wooden desk stacked with scrolls, sits Etienne, an overworked former tax clerk with a delicate nose, a tremble in his left eyelid, and the proud distinction of being Paris's first ever inspector of whiskers. You see him adjust his cravat, open his velvet-lined measuring kit, and sigh deeply into the morning gloom. Your grandfather was the width of a saucer. You're ushered in. Etienne peers at you through oval spectacles that seem permanently fogged with despair. "Next, they'll measure eyebrows," one mutters, "or how many buttons we can wear." There's a growing sentiment that the mustache law is less about beauty and more about control. That once on a rainy Tuesday, he declared a mustache emotionally balanced and simply walked away. "First warning," he mutters. "No, fine, yet wax carefully." He's become a reluctant specter, half civil servant, half joke. You can't decide whether he's a bureaucrat or a philosopher with too much time. Children follow him, imitating his measuring gestures with sticks and giggles. You watch from the shadows as he sits at his window, staring at a framed sketch of his late father, Barber from Lyon. Then, he carefully wipes down his ruler and places it in a cedar box. The story goes that Etienne grew up surrounded by brushes and blades, that he once dreamed of being a poet, and that the government's offer came with a monthly cheese stipend, too generous to refuse. Fair. Others say he trimmed it himself, whispering, "Let sorrow remain, but let it be symmetrical," and completely trapped. A painter sketches a cartoon of him battling a mustache dragon. Street performer dresses as Etienne, measuring baguettes and yelling, "Inappropriate crust length," or weirder. The crowds love it. The real Etienne does not. It's wildly popular. Etienne halted him, unfolded his full-length measuring sash, and measured the curl to the half-millimeter. He'd fined the man twice, once for width, once for audible smugness. You're 2 millimeters over. It was printed in La Gazette Folliculaire, the official newsletter of the Facial Decorum Council. He stares at your face for a long beat, then writes notified in delicate script on a parchment slip. Historians still argue whether Etienne truly existed, or whether his character was an invention of 19th-century satirical playwrights. A man-turned-measuring martyr? Some say he inspired a novella. Others insist his records survive, filled with descriptions of mustaches so florid they read like botanical entries. Whether real or imagined, the inspector became legend. Etienne lifts the comb. The man lifts his chin. There is conflict. You watch as the next man steps up, young, smug, dressed like a poet on laundry day. This, the man says, is a tribute to my grandfather. Etienne does not blink. The man receives a fine and a pamphlet about modesty in personal expression. He leaves humming something defiant. Back outside, you hear merchants grumbling. Meanwhile, Etienne trudges down narrow lanes each afternoon, clipboard in hand. And yet he takes it seriously. His notes include heartfelt pleas for leniency and deeply poetic observations like, "The curvature of this man's right curl does evoke sadness." Word spreads of his quirks, that he favors ginger mustaches, that he sometimes lets violists go unmeasured if they hum a pleasant tune. But don't mistake leniency for weakness. In one infamous incident, a nobleman named Duvillard strutted into Etienne's path with a mustache so wide it actually brushed passers-by. Duvillard, enraged, attempted to duel him. Etienne declined, citing health conditions. Instead, he wrote a 37-line haiku about restraint. Yes, that was a real thing. Probably at sunset. Etienne retreats to a modest apartment above a pickle shop. He whispers to no one, "I never asked for this." Despite the ridicule, Etienne inspires a kind of respect. He's consistent. Some say he once let a grieving man keep his oversized mustache for a funeral. Still, the city grows restless. Pamphlets appear denouncing the face police. Satirical plays lampoon inspectors hiding in bushes, but even critics admit no one else could have done the job better. One evening, you pass him alone at the riverbank, measuring the reflection of his own mustache in the water. You pause, unsure whether to laugh or cry. He notices you. Nods. "Yours is growing evenly," he says, and with that, he's gone. It's like a ghost with paperwork. You sit at a cafe as the afternoon light turns the windows golden. Listening to two bakers argue about the difference between a rebellious mustache and a simply expressive one. One waves a baguette for emphasis. The other dramatically twists the end of his own mustache, which, judging by the gasps of nearby patrons, is at least half a centimeter over the legal limit. "Let them come measure me," he shouts, crumbs flying. "I was born with width." You sip your lukewarm coffee, watching as this small act of resistance ripples through the tables. The waiter narrows his eyes. Somewhere a chair squeaks ominously. And then, just like that, the width wars begin. Waxmakers rename their products things like Subtle Defiance and Last Supple. When questioned, he simply replies, "I play the piccolo. I need lift." No one's sure if that's legal or just poetic. The law had made mustaches political, and Parisians naturally responded with creativity. Sarcasm and increasingly elaborate hair. Butlers begin trimming their mustaches exactly to regulation, then waxing the edges just past it by half a grain of rice. One man allegedly wore a detachable mustache stitched from his grandmother's wig. It earned him 3 dates and a 1-week ban from the Palais Garnier. They come in shades like ashen ambiguity, formal forest, and existential beige. He becomes a cult hero. You meet a tailor who adds thin silver thread to his mustache measuring wire, he claims. Accuracy is protest. A particularly grumpy inspector reportedly used a baguette as a measurement tool during a strike. "If it's longer than half a baguette, it's a threat," he barked. An anonymous manifesto circulates titled "The Lip Reclaims Itself." They meet at dawn, exchange coded greetings like "nice curvature today," and slip each other wax samples, like they're trading state secrets. It accuses the ministry of waging a campaign of facial homogenization. It includes diagrams of permitted mustache rebellion patterns, such as the crescent whisper. A group of university students begin wearing upside-down wigs over their mouths, styled to resemble mustaches that drape downward like curtains. His business quadruples. They call it the reverse expression movement. They last 2 weeks before collective chin rash shuts the operation down. The phantom angle and the sympathetic disagreement. Inside, a young man sits quietly as the barber trims away his mustache's final, defiant curl. The air is still. No one speaks. It's not about fashion anymore. It's about control. Simple sketches of mustaches, one too wide, one too narrow, one shaped like a question mark. Beneath them, someone has written. The show was meant to be a retelling of the Odyssey, but one puppet bore an obviously non-compliant mustache. Audience members shouted both in support and outrage. Maybe the sound of resistance curling up, tucking itself in for the night. Others believe it's a test stand experiment to see how much people will surrender in the name of style. You begin to see it too. The show ended in confusion, but tickets sold out for the rest of the week. Historians still debate the scope and seriousness of these so-called wars. Some say they were little more than heated arguments, and others insist they led to near riots, secret codes, and a limited edition facial hair poetry anthology. Whatever the truth, it was clear that Paris had entered a new phase. Resistance by styling. You see it in the shop windows. Barbers hang signs offering interpretive compliance trims, a phrase that means absolutely nothing but sounds convincing. You pass a group of musicians, each with an identical narrow mustache, except the last one, whose flourish curls boldly skyward. Tensions rise. You can't help but smile. It's the sort of protest only Paris could produce, sequel parts philosophical and fashionable. Soon the pushback takes more organized forms. Artisans boycott the city's official measuring comb supplier, claiming it favors narrower cheeks. You hear whispers of barbers practicing width reversals, trimming hair to legal standards during inspections, then secretly replacing the ends with extensions made of horsehair, lace, or fine wool. On the edge of town, an elderly wax vendor named Jean-Pierre begins selling emergency mustache packs, small velvet pouches containing legal-length mustaches that can be slapped on in a hurry. But the city doesn't laugh for long. Reports emerge of informal inspections, officers checking faces outside theaters, churches, even bakeries. You overhear barbers whispering about who's on the lenient list, officials who only pretend to measure. One night, a public debate breaks out in a puppet theater of all places. As you stroll past the Palarial, you notice chalk graffiti appearing beneath the colonnades. Measure ideas, not whiskers. It hits you harder than you expect. Some take their protest to absurd lengths. A tailor is fined for selling shirts with hidden messages embroidered into the collar's phrases like, "My mustache is not a crime, and Don T. comb my rights. Still the law holds." More pamphlets appear, clever, artful, desperate. Some argue that the law is just a distraction from rising bread prices. One night, you stop outside a barber shop. The barber finishes and gently brushes away the hair. The man stares at his reflection, and then, softly, he laughs. You don't know why? Maybe relief. It'd be madness. A new flyer flutters past your feet. It reads, "True width cannot be measured." You pocket it. You wake to shouting in the alley below your rented room, angry voices, flowery curses, and the distinct slap of a baguette being used as a weapon. You shuffle to the window, breath fogging the pain, and look down to find two cobblers, one chimney sweep, and a man dressed as a violin bow fighting over a mustache stencil. A woman in a bonnet yells, "It's not even symmetrical." To general agreement, this is no isolated incident. Enter sideburns. Those humble trails of fuzz, previously relegated to background duty, suddenly stepped forward with new confidence, and not a lick of regulation to rein them in. The sideburn envy is here, and it's spreading. He hums softly, his head swaying like a metronome. The man behind the counter peers at you with suspicion. Curled, braided, dyed. One man has his shaped into the profile of a hawk. A woman, yes, women are joining in displays sideburns made of lace and beeswax, fluttering delicately whenever she laughs. When the mustaches came under regulation, people looked for new outlets of expression. You stroll down Rue Mouffetard, where sideburns are blooming like hedgerows. A clerk passes by with matching sideburns shaped like violin scrolls. You enter a cobbler's shop just to browse. To preserve length, she says, knowingly. For the cause. You're here to report me. I've definitely hidden a man in the back who's being illegally waxed. Their sideburns become banners of rebellion. Apologetic, absurd, delightfully fuzzy. They call themselves the Flanking Fraternity. You are absolutely not invited unless you can recite their secret handshake poem, which involves 3 rhyming lines about goat leather. You leave before the word allegorical gets thrown. The audience eats it up. No one dares ask what it all means, but it feels important. It's a visual suggestion of unity. Nothing legally actionable, but emotionally defiant. It's thunderous applause. 3 men in the audience immediately begin brushing their cheeks with fresh egg whites. Because if I hear one more inspector say my sideburns constitute a facial workaround, I swear I'll shave my eyebrows in protest. The Ministry of Civility releases a statement. Just looking, you reply. He sighs. Good. You'd feel bad if it weren't so funny. No one commissioned it, but everyone nods solemnly when they pass. Someone ties a ribbon to its ear.
Oh.
You smile politely. Then you notice his sideburns are shaped like boots. Etienne sighs and mutters, "It's not my jurisdiction," before walking away, visibly defeated. 7. However, citizens are reminded that all facial expressions must reflect the spirit of modesty. A breeze lifts it from your hands and carries it down the cobblestone path. Turns out, cobblers are leading the charge. The theory goes like this. Since cobblers were never fashion icons, they have nothing to lose. You don't remember when your own sideburns started to grow out, but they have. Just a bit. Nothing dramatic. But enough. One diary entry describes a cobbler shouting, "We are the whiskers of the jawline," before waxing himself into unconsciousness. Historians still debate whether this movement had formal structure or was just a coincidence of angry repairmen. You pop into a hat shop next, where the proprietor offers sideburn protectors stitched from velvet. She gives you a wink that says, "And you're not wrong." In back rooms across the city, a new style emerges. The side-swept rebellion, a technique where sideburns are trained to arc subtly upward, almost kissing the mustache line but never quite connecting. At a wine shop, 2 customers argue over whose burns are more narrative. Theaters adapt quickly. Costume designers begin accentuating characters' sideburns to indicate morality. Heroes get noble, contained lines. Villains get curling tendrils like angry vines. You pause to watch a street play called The Left Cheek Nose, in which a man's sideburn slowly grows throughout the scene until it strangles his corrupt landlord. By week's end, Paris is a jungle of whiskers. Sideburns are not, at this time, considered within the scope of regulation. No, it is, of course, ignored. You spot Etienne, the weary mustache inspector examining a man whose burns spiral like snails. Satirical newspapers depict him being chased by anthropomorphic sideburns wielding tiny pitchforks. In a quiet park, a sculptor chisels a statue of the unknown cobbler, sideburns blowing in an imagined breeze. Children are now naming their pet rabbits Flank, Burnsy, and Legal Loophole. The trend shows no sign of slowing, and still beneath the flare something deeper simmers. A pamphlet arrives on your cafe table, slid to you silently by a man whose beard is suspiciously long. The front reads, "Facial freedom is non-negotiable." Inside is a passage that lingers with you. We must grow where we are not watched, must speak where we are not measured. Our hair is history curling through time. You fold the paper slowly. You don't chase it. You already know what it says. That night, as you pass a mirror, you run a finger along your cheek. A small rebellion. A quiet one. A necessary one. You wake before dawn, drawn by whispers on the wind, soft and secretive, like the rustle of silk behind a dressing screen. Paris is still asleep, but something stirs below the surface. You throw on your coat and follow the quiet trail of gas lamps flickering like fireflies. Past shuttered shops and curled posters warning of excessive expression. You tap 3 times, pause, then twice more. The sequence wasn't told to you. You felt it. You're headed somewhere. Unlisted. Eyes flick across your face, no questions, just instinct. The door creaks. Behind an apothecary, and beneath a crooked sign shaped like a shaving brush, you find it. A plain wooden door with no handle. A slit opens. Men and women sit before foggy mirrors, while barbers in linen sleeves work quickly, expertly, illegally. "You're out of balance," she says. "You knew that, didn't you? This is where mustaches come to be restored. Smuggled stubble is whispered like a commodity." No, she trims for character, for story. One barber folds her trimming cloths into origami birds that she perches along the windowsill, 12 of them, all with curled tails. "Left their razors," someone else replies. "That's just theater. They can't shut all of us down. They'll go bald first." Each movement says they don't own your face. In the corner, a man carefully removes a velvet pouch holding 2 identical curls preserved in wax and velvet, like religious relics. Were they truly havens of aesthetic rebellion, or just after-hours barbershops looking to make an extra sou? But diaries from the era speak in code: evening curls, midnight trims, at lunar symmetry, phrases with meanings layered like pastry. From an inside pocket, he pulls a rolled parchment and pins it to the wall. You step closer to read it. "Welcome to the underground salons. In a candlelit room that smells of clove and beeswax, people huddle in whispers. It's slightly too grand, but that's the point." Another customer speaks of a courier network smuggling in rare waxes from Florence. Legal width, but press on the edge, and it bends half a centimeter inward, in case the inspector's too rough. You glance toward a quiet couple in the corner. He touches up her pencil mustache with a brush dipped in soot and candle ash. They laugh like school children caught in a prank. "Hand-spun wax from the Pyrenees," he murmurs. "Not regulation approved." Someone gasps. A poet faints. You sit down without meaning to. A barber named Colette peers at you, lifts your chin with 2 fingers, and tuts softly. The kind of trim that says, "I know the law. I just choose not to bow to it." The posters on the lampposts look more faded now. You wonder if people really read them anymore. You swear it winks at you. You nod. Of course you do. We all do. Colette works quickly, snipping and shaping, but not to comply. A single enormous mustache curls around the side of a chimney. No face, just the mustache, like a flag or a smile left behind. Historians still argue whether these underground salons ever existed in the way rumors claim. Across the room, a man is being fitted with a false mustache made of horsehair and theatrical glue. It's a strange thing, watching rebellion unfold in such quiet gestures. A tailor arrives with a roll of fabric stitched with hidden messages in Morse code. Buttonholes of protest, he calls them. You overhear someone say, "Tonight, the inspector raided 3 salons, took their rulers." There's laughter, subdued but sharp. Suddenly, the room quiets. A man walks in, wearing a cloak, too warm for the season. He removes it slowly, revealing a regulation-compliant mustache. Gasps. A few people stand. One backs toward the door. But then he smiles and reaches into his coat. It's a diagram. 10 ways to cheat the width check without altering actual growth. Method 3. Asymmetric lighting. Method 6. Decoy whiskers on spectacles. Method 9. Micro-curling via pin and steam. Applause. Erupt soft. Reverent. This is not just a barber shop. This is a school, a movement, a sanctuary for the subversively styled. You feel both humbled and deeply, delightfully ridiculous. Colette hands you a small comb. It's pine. Made it myself. You thank her and slip it into your sleeve like a dagger. Outside, dawn creeps over the rooftops. The bakery on the corner begins to stir. A milk cart rattles past. In an alley behind the salon, you find a mural being painted on brick. A boy passing by stops, stares, then lifts his scarf to cover his mouth. Not in shame, but solidarity. You walk away with your chin lifted ever so slightly, and your sheer mustache. It's perfect now, balanced but bold, legal but only barely. A curl catches the light. By now, you've settled into the rhythm of this mustachioed mystery. But tonight, your feet take you somewhere entirely different. Not salons or back alleys, but the echoing halls of bureaucracy. Yes, you're stepping into the belly of the beast itself, the Parisian Office of Personal Ornamentation. Subcommittee on Facial Presentation. Clerks shuffle parchment, inkwells clink, and somewhere in the distance, a man coughs apologetically. It smells like starch, paper dust, and very faintly. Cinnamon. It's less thrilling than it sounds. It's made entirely of men with suspiciously symmetrical mustaches. It's each clasping a form labeled R2 to B, Declaration of Follicular Intent. Ahead of you, a gentleman adjusts his monocle and whispers, "First time filing?" You nod. "Good luck," he says gravely. They changed the width-to-curl ratio again last week. Climb marble steps worn by nervous boots. Inside, rows of desks stretch endlessly under gaslit chandeliers that buzz like a swarm of sleepy wasps. You join the queue. A board clerk waves you forward. You sit. She doesn't look up. Name you give it. You're told 2 complete sections, 1 through 37, excluding 14, unless the asymmetry was weather-induced. One has a magnifying monocle. Another a tiny ruler built into his ring. Third just stares. Justify. Section 22 asks you to diagram your mustache's silhouette from memory, while Section 30 requests a 500-word essay on personal philosophy as expressed through hair. You show them a character reference signed by your neighborhood baker. You even invoke the ancient Gauls. They wore their mustaches proudly. One judge nods. The other raises an eyebrow. The third sneezes. Purpose of visit? Either way, the paperwork is real. One 18th-century satire depicts a man being arrested not for facial hair itself, but for failure to properly submit with exemption form a 9D in triplicate. Her eyes are exhausted. He scribbles on your form, stamps it with a heavy thud, and hands it back. Curl violation? You point at your upper lip. You pass a kiosk where satirical pamphlets are sold in secret. The follicular front, Whisker Weekly, the curl underground. You flip through one. A cartoon shows a nobleman using 2 baguettes as mustache measuring sticks. Beneath it, the caption reads, "Let them trim cake. Declaration or appeal. ... appeal." She finally looks at you. You nod. She sighs deeply, then slides you a new form. A7F. Mustache deviation, justification. Historians still argue whether these absurd forms were a product of sincere civic order or the result of one. Administrators slowed descent into madness after a botched pomade shipment. Some say it was confined to certain districts. Others believe it was more symbolic a stand-in for controlling identity itself. But everyone agrees on one thing. In the next room, a tribunal awaits. You sit before 3 magistrates with a different mustache style, all suspiciously within regulation. I heard someone's growing a beard to protest the mustache laws. She curls herself up, tail tucked perfectly in regulation, sips slowly. Eyes drifting across a city where something silly became something sacred. My cousin's got a goat and a glue pot wearer starting a club. Some approvingly, others with envy. One man walks by with a fantastical twirl of a mustache, wrapped once around his ears. You raise your cup to him and salute. Winks. "Your mustache," he says slowly, "has a curl deviation of 3 millimeters. You launch into a defense. Humidity, genetics, heartbreak. My barber sneezed. They deliberate. You're told to wait. You wait and wait. A man walks out of the tribunal room sobbing into a lace handkerchief. "I trimmed too much," he whispers. "And now I am only chin." You're summoned again. This time, the head magistrate leans in. You've shown remorse and creativity. We're inclined toward leniency, conditional reinstatement, probationary grooming. Next review in 30 days. Victory almost. You walk out in a daze. Outside, pigeons coo like bureaucratic ghosts. Chuckle escapes you. Further down the street, you spot a chalkboard sign outside a Caf Ermal hall. Happy hour for all mustache sizes. It's unclear who Bernard is, but you feel for him. You sit order a café au lait and notice how people glance at your upper lip. There's talk at nearby tables. The Minister of Appearance wore a fake mustache last week. It's all so ridiculous. And yet, so human. Historians like to dismiss these tales as embellishments. They argue about how widespread the enforcement truly was. It was never really about mustaches. It was about expression, absurdity, and the quiet ways people say, "I am still me." Cafe cat jumps onto your lap. Tomorrow, you'll comb your mustache differently. Just enough to raise a question, never quite enough to be called out. Tonight, you just breathe. Somewhere far behind you, in an office still lit by flickering lamps, a clerk notices a form slightly out of alignment. She smiles, and files it anyway. You wake to the faint sound of bells, soft, distant, like someone politely announcing revolution from a few streets over. Morning in 18th century Paris is always a little loud. Hooves clip along cobblestones. Vendors call out bread and onions. Someone swears creatively about laundry. Be even dare you hope a professional opinion that doesn't involve parchment and tribunals. But today you have one thing on your mind. The return of the barbers. Yes. After yesterday's bureaucratic gauntlet, you've earned it. A fresh trim. A moment of peace. You trudge through winding alleys until you find it. A cozy little barbershop nestled between a bookstore and a pigeon-coupe-turn-philosophy club. The sign above the door reads, Chez Guillot, tensorial art since the Fronde. Below it, a tiny scribble. We obey the width laws, mostly. Inside, the smell of warm shaving soap hits you like a memory from a better time. He tucks in the cape with a flourish, weights the brush, and begins. Brass basins gleam. Straight razors lie in perfect rows, and on the far wall, but several caricatures from the period show stern-faced. Men with one side of their face clean-shaven, and the other wild as Rousseau's beard, like a mustache ruler with painted gradations, from respectable to anarchist. Guillot himself greets you. He's a short, wiry man with a walrus mustache so finely balanced it looks like it might conduct an orchestra. You're late, he says cheerfully. By 3 days and 4 hairs. The magistrates hate it, but the girls love it. Grows his mustache precisely to hairs wider than legal no more, no less. Walks past enforcers like a phantom, and walked out with a stamp of approval and a slice of lemon cake. Others claim he's just 3 barbers sharing one disguise. You take your seat in the great reclining chair. You heard about the underground, yes? He asks casually, swirling foam onto your cheeks. They're growing out the left side only. Call it asymmetric resistance. Snip, the scissors move like thought itself. Punctuation mark that says, I'm not finished yet. Guillot leans back to admire his work. Historians still argue whether this was a real form of protest or just Parisians being Parisians. Guillot chuckles. Who's been fined, who's rebelled, who's managed to fold their whiskers into origami cranes. As he trims, the conversation drifts. You learn that the barbershop functions as a sort of intelligence network not for espionage, but for mustache gossip. The real excitement, however, is a name whispered reverently. Law, the lock. You pause mid-shave. A code name. Guillot nods. They say he's never been caught. Law has become a local legend. Some say he once entered a magistrate's office, offered them tea. You ask why people follow him. One faction within the Appearance Bureau had begun pushing for stricter interpretations of the code, labeling even abstract mustaches as subversive. They've gathered around a musician playing an out-tuned lute. His beard is regulation, his mustache covered by a bandage. You duck under an awning and watch as the street fills with umbrellas and laughter. A boy walks past with a stick-on mustache, obviously drawn in ink. A gendarme frowns, but lets him go. Because Guillot says he's not just growing a mustache, he's growing a question. A caricature of a nobleman with a mustache so massive it wraps around his head twice. Bold red letters underneath red. A woman with a clipboard, measuring people's faces with her eyes. There's a sketch on the last page, a man standing at the edge of a cliff, mustache fluttering in the wind like wings. A way of showing you're part of the joke, the resistance, the messy, marvelous human refusal to be fully tamed. Enforcement still lingers. And just this morning, a tailor was fined, not for his own mustache, but for embroidering mustaches onto his waistcoats. There, he says, legal, barely, but with personality. You look in the mirror. Subtle, just a gentle flick at the tip, like a comma on your face. As you rise to leave, Guillot slides you a small pamphlet. The manifesto of the whiskered, no author, no publisher, just the quiet whisper of rebellion. You read a line aloud. A face without freedom is merely a mask. He shrugs. Poetic types. They're even writing mustache hymns now. Outside, the sky is clouded over. Rain begins to tap gently against the shutters. Atch. Because how do you arrest someone for imagination? Further down, you pass a poster pasted sloppily on a wall. Your width is your worth. You can't help but smile. And yet for every giggle or wink, there's someone watching. Man in a dull gray coat. Symbolic incitement, they called it. Historians suggest this escalation marked a turning point. You turn a corner and nearly walk into a crowd. He sings anyway. They shave my lip but not my voice, so now I hum and protest's choice. The crowd claps softly. A few people cry. As you head home, something shifts in you. It's not just hair anymore, it's language. Back in your apartment, you light a candle and reread the manifesto. And you wonder, is that law? Is it just who we all become when we stop trimming ourselves to fit? You're standing at your window now, watching the candle flame flicker like a nervous heartbeat. Outside, the rain has softened into a whisper, brushing across slate rooftops like the lightest touch of a barber's brush. Paris is quieter at night, less shouting, more sighing. But even in this hush, change is pacing the streets in well-polished boots. Because apparently, what this city needed more than bread or sanitation was people with rulers and the legal right to frown at you. Tomorrow, the magistrates will unveil the newest twist in this saga, the official mustache-width enforcement squads. Yes, squads. Uniformed, clipboard-carrying, face-inspecting squads. You hear the gossip early pass from baker to lamplighter, from bookseller to gossiping widow on the third floor. They're calling them the Whisker Watch, made of fine brass. 2, imported from England, with engraved initials and velvet-lined cases. Very serious tools for very serious business. Measuring from the philtrum to the tip, from curve to curl, ensuring that no man or woman, because yes. They're checking theatrical makeup now. Theirs exceed the maximum allowable flamboyance. No, it's La Brigade de la either way. They've got calipers, darling. Average height, neutral coat, small paper package in hand, probably dinner. There are 3 of them, one with spectacles, one with an exaggerated bow tie, and one who seems to hum suspiciously whenever a mustache passes. Calipers they do. You step into the street just as one such squad glides past like a very punctual swarm of bees. They stop a man near the fountain. The squad leans in. One snaps open the calipers. The other scribbled notes. One clever merchant sold mustache goggles with built-in measurement lenses advertised as fashionable self-discipline for the modern face. Sir, remove your scarf. And tells you that her mustache is entirely real, crafted from badger hair, dyed weekly, and glued on with molasses in defiance.
Oh.
So I borrow courage. A hush falls. Slowly, the man unwinds his scarf, revealing a delightfully curled mustache, definitely illegal by about 3 whiskers. She shows you a ledgerose of names, times, shapes. It feels like wearing a sigh that's trying to smile. A secret collective offering loaner mustaches to those in need. A widow mourning her husband's whiskers. Every so often, he tilts his head and scribbles in a notebook. It wrote itself. I just gave it paper. When someone asks about the manifesto, he shrugs. You offer him your extra mustache. From S-Box. People are adapting, not despite the laws, but because of them. Every restriction creates a loophole. Every ruling inspires a workaround. Every caliper sparkles with irony. He winks and says, "Keep it. I've got a beard in my boot." A figure enters through the back hall, cloaked and unmistakably mustached. A boy practicing confidence. A playwright looking for the right look to sell satire, not with chance, but with curled winks and perfectly calculated defiance. But then, something unexpected happens. The man smiles. "Ah, you're just in time." He pulls out a certificate, freshly stamped and dated. The lead inspector examines it, frowns, stamps his own approval. Everyone sighs. Historians still debate whether this moment marked a victory for bureaucracy or simply for clever counterfeiting. But it set a precedent. Citizens began gaming the system, or at least someone claiming to be. Law. One hair at a time, a revolution is trimmed into shape. Tailors started adding legal width guidelines to their collars. Barbers offered width insurance packages, monthly trims with a compliance guarantee. And yes, of course, the black market bloomed. People breathe a little slower, sit a little taller. A waitress refills your wine without asking. A dog naps on your foot. In a tavern to arrondissements over, you meet a woman named who lifts her glass. "My job won't let me grow one," she says, eyes sparkling. In her world, mustaches are symbols for anyone denied expression. They even rate the pieces. Stoic, playful, revolutionary. You try on one, labeled melancholy optimist. That night, in the same tavern, a hush falls again. It's him. He doesn't speak much, just sits by the fire and listens. I didn't write it, whether he's real or not. You feel the tension in the room shift. You think this is what the laws never understood. You can measure hair, but not meaning. Back outside, the whisker watch is arresting a man for expressive sideburns. The absurdity is exhausting, but the defiance. That's what fuels you now. One poet sums it up best in the underground newsletter lip line. Their rules trace lines. Our lives redraw them. And so, the rebellion continues not with torches, but with twirls. The next morning, you find that barbers are now offering mustache width readings like fortune tellers. Guillot gives you yours. He stares at your reflection, solemn. You're 2 millimeters from liberation, he says. You nod gravely. What happens if I go further, he smiles. You stop measuring. And with that, the scissors begin to snip again. You wake to find Paris humming, not shouting, not roaring, just this low, persistent murmur, like someone trying not to laugh too loudly during a sermon. It's market day in Montorgueil. The air smells like lemons, wet cobblestones, and moderately illegal mustache wax. You duck past crates of oysters and wheels of cheese, all stacked with architectural ambition, and realize something curious. Nearly every vendor sports a mustache now. You restopped by a young inspector, whose cap is far too big, and whose tape measure keeps folding in on itself like a nervous pet. Some real, some sculpted from wool, one suspiciously made of licorice. The authorities, in their ever-expanding flair for overcorrection, have begun random checkpoint inspections. He hesitates. It's within regulation, but something about the angle unsettles him. Your mustache, please, he says mechanically. What's undeniable is the chaos it introduced. Mustaches that appear smug, suspicious. Ones that droop like disappointed eyebrows. Acceptable, but depressing. You oblige? This has attitude. At first they meet in cellars, behind bakeries, and under apothecaries. But soon they spread. Abandoned theaters, crypts, even disused bell towers. Everyone analyzing everyone else's upper lip like it holds secrets to national security. The crowd erupts in silent claps, waving hands, no noise. He lets you pass, but you catch him scribbling a note that reads, possible infraction, charismatic grooming. Historians still argue whether these escalating interpretations of facial law were deliberate crackdowns or simply the result of bored bureaucrats inventing nuance. She holds it to her face with trembling fingers, and the room softens into stillness. Because now it's not just width, it's symmetry, posture, and even emotional intent. Paris becomes a city of face readers. Meanwhile, underground fashion circles start to bloom. You're invited to one such gathering by Guillot, who now wears a mustache shaped like a lightning bolt, thin as a whisper, and definitely over-regulation. It's not a protest. It's a silent, twitching rebellion told through hair and glue. A barber is arrested for harboring rogue whiskers. His salon is shut down. The sign is crossed out with red ink and replaced with, he leads you down a spiral staircase into a candlelit gallery. On the walls, portraits of great mustaches, past real and imagined. D'Artagnan, Voltaire. Even Cleopatra, who, according to one fringe historian, briefly wore a ceremonial mustache during diplomatic negotiations. Halfway through Act 2, the tenor drops his sword and delivers an impromptu aria on follicular oppression. Here, the members don't just display mustaches, they perform them. He's calm, sipping weak coffee, his face half-shaved. Each performance ends with a new shape, drawn in chalk above the stage. A symbol, a whisper, a call to the curled. He winks. Don't worry, the underground's stronger than ever. We're recruiting from the opera. A woman struts the stage with a sculpted swirl that arches like ocean waves. Not because it's elegant, but because it means people are watching and watching back. He's seen it all: wars, regimes, fashion crimes. Then comes a man who speaks only through twitching whiskers, delivering a silent soliloquy titled The Curl of Dissent. And finally, a child no older than 10 steps forward with a felt mustache cut from her father's coat. Afterward, Guillot whispers, we call it lip theater. Every show is an act of gentle resistance. That phrase sticks with you. Gentle resistance. It's not a riot. It's a thing you've been circling this whole time. Outside, the crackdown intensifies. Posters now warn of facial anomalies. A hotline is launched. Citizens are encouraged to report suspicious grooming behavior. He waves. His curls are too young to grow one yet, so he carries his in a sketchbook. Facial Compliance Center, Zone 3. You visit him in the holding cell? I trimmed too close to irony, he says. You try not to laugh. Sure enough, later that week, you attend a matinee of La Belle. E.T. Le Barbier. The crowd gasps. Just because it feels like your face is telling its own story now. One line at a time. The conductor shrugs and keeps playing. It becomes a sensation. A mustache operetta is born. But not everyone's thrilled. The Chamber of Civic Symmetry, a recently formed government board, calls for facial neutrality. Their spokesperson, Madame Vache, announces, "The human face is no place for rebellion." Cue the satire. Within days, graffiti appears. Then why does yours look like a revolution lost? And beneath it, a crude stencil of Madame Vache's frown, adorned with a cartoonishly large fake mustache. You smile? That night, over wine and soft jazz leaking from a basement club, you meet an old sculptor named Armand. "I once carved a mustache out of marble," he says, eyes twinkling, 4 feet wide. Took 6 months. You ask him what he thinks of all this? He pauses, sips, then says mustaches are just metaphors. Some people don't want you to have metaphors, and there it is. It's not about hair. It's about freedom to shape something your face, your identity, your quiet protest, however you want. As the city tightens its rules, people expand their imaginations. You pass a boy drawing mustaches in chalk on cobblestones. Somewhere, law is writing again. Sledger now has over 200 names. Mustache goggles are sold out. And you've stopped trimming. Not out of rebellion, really. You're letting it. You drift through the streets now like someone floating between 2 layers of time. Above ground, Paris still functions. Bread is still baked, dress is still stitched, street sweepers still mutter about pigeons with too much attitude. But underneath, there's a pulse, fuzz-covered pulse, like a secret whispered through bristles. A tiny upward curl at the corners. I'm hiding 3 unlicensed handlebars in my attic. One gentleman even winks, then sneezes sign. You're told that he's in possession of black market grooming scissors. You start to notice coded greetings among the mustached underground. A brief twist of the upper lip. I saw the new mustache opera last night, but the anecdotal evidence is strong. One diary from the period lists 24 expressions that allegedly meant the guards are watching, including eyebrow hover with delayed exhale. Historians still debate whether this coded facial language actually existed, or whether it was simply post-rebellion romanticizing. You sit in one now, upholstery torn, scissors hanging like little silver guillotines, and the barber leans in. Even barbers began turning their chairs into confessional booths. "Just a trim?" he asks. You nod. You pass a sign reading, whisper right, and he gives you interpretation. A tiny rebellion etched in keratin. A man is chased for allegedly smuggling eyebrow pencils in a violin case. A mime is detained for implying a mustache in his performance. These are handcrafted masterpieces, some carved from wood, others crocheted, still others molded from hardened chocolate. Says a bit of bitterness is essential to any good rebellion. One artisan claims his pieces can withstand both rain and philosophical despair. One clever seamstress invents convertible monocles that transform into mustache disguises with a flick of the wrist. His invisible handlebars were, apparently, too persuasive. He begins. Then, after a moment, left or right, you pause. That's the new choice. If you whisper left, he gives you the government-approved cut straight. Predictable, unprovocative. You whisper right. Or maybe just someone who's gotten used to seeing their reflection, or something illegal. It feels like danger. It speaks of faces as canvases, of grooming as storytelling, of state interference as an absurd overstep into personal topography. It's printed on thick cream paper, edges singed like a relic. The cover shows a single stylized mustache. Below, in simple type, like art. He nods, solemn. The snip of scissors becomes music. You swear he hums the overture to the curl of dissent as he works. When you leave, you can feel it. A faint asymmetry. The crackdown, meanwhile, reaches absurd new heights. Public grooming equals public disorder. Comb at home. Chalked on walls, sewn into pockets, sung by schoolchildren skipping rope. But it spread like jam on warm brioche. Even those who didn't wear mustaches quoted it. One guard even compliments your now decidedly off-regulation side curls before pretending to sneeze and walk away. A junior official is caught doodling elaborate facial hairstyles in the margins of a proposed curfew law. One priest ends his sermon with it, accidentally inciting a standing ovation. A troupe pantomimes the entire history of the mustache regulations using only hand shadows and silhouettes. It ends with a giant paper mask burning slowly, revealing a mirror behind it. A woman is fined for brushing her bangs too dramatically on the Pont Neuf, and so the resistance adapts. Fake mustache sales skyrocket, but no longer cheap costume shop novelties. You find yourself at one of his demonstrations, where he dips a chocolate mustache into hot espresso, licks the edge, one side dips like it's shrugging. You applaud with your coffee cup. Soon, everyone has a mustache contingency plan. Some sew them into coat linings, others wear reversible beards. Still, surveillance increases. The government installs mirrors in public gardens, claiming they're for botanical reflection. Everyone knows they're for grooming audits. You walk past one, and for a second, you think you see yourself as someone else, someone braver, and then comes the pamphlet. You find it under your door one morning, slipped in with your morning baguette. Manifesto of the upper lip. Inside, the message isn't angry, it's gentle, earnest, and at the end it reads, "If you can't shape your own face, what's left to shape?" Do you memorize that line? Historians still argue whether this pamphlet marked the official birth of the Facial Liberation League, or whether it was simply one of many scattered sparks. Soon, slogans start appearing around town. Curl, don't conform. Whiskers before whispering. Our faces, our fringe. Pass a woman knitting one of these phrases into a scarf, and she smiles. Winter's coming, she says. Might as well stay warm and subversive. And the city it bends. Not breaks yet, but bends. The specters start pretending not to see subtle violations. You hear whispers of quiet revolt inside City Hall. A secretary forgets to remove her pencil mustache before a press briefing. There's tension in the air, but it feels expectant, like something is about to shift. One evening, you attend a shadow performance in the back room of a candle shop. Everyone sits in silence, watching themselves. No one says a word. And you? You leave the shop and walk into the chilly night. You catch your reflection in a darkened storefront. The mustache isn't even symmetrical anymore. You grin. Not because it's rebellious, just because it's yours. You wake to the smell of beeswax and stale inked scents that, at this point, signal either underground theater or bureaucratic panic. Today, it's the latter. Something's brewing at the ministry. A small crowd gathers, whispering. You elbow your way in, scanning the elegantly flourished notice. You stroll past the Polarial and catch sight of a bulletin being posted by a jittery clerk in shoes far too shiny for this hour. In accordance with articles of personal presentation and urban harmony, any facial embellishment exceeding 2.7 centimeters in lateral span shall be subject to immediate inspection and, if deemed disruptive, removal. They've measured the rebellion. The absurd precision, 2.7 centimeters, sparks giggles. Someone in the crowd mutters, "My cousin's mustache is 2.9 centimeters and hasn't said a word in years. Feel it?" This is desperation disguised as discipline. Others claim a disgruntled official simply snapped and traced his ink quill. Mousse à la mustache is now a dessert special. The daily soup de surveillance. Even the spoons are bent slightly, like tiny curled mustaches protesting silently from the flatware drawer. But you don't laugh. Historians still debate whether this specific measurement had symbolic origins. Some say it was modeled after the average size of the royal corgi's ear. Dim lanterns, velvet cushions, someone dramatically reciting Ode to the Forgotten Follicle. A woman next to you weeps into her tea. They march through Rue Montorgueil in synchronized formation, their instruments painted with fake mustaches. Quiet understanding that even something as small and silly as hair when restricted can grow into something towering. What's clear is this: the state is losing control. And when control slips, they reach for rulers. Back at your favorite cafe, the waiters have turned the menu into a protest mural. And then trumpets. Actual trumpets. There's a column titled Stubble Trouble, written in verse. And an anonymous advice section. Asked Madame Whiskering, offering tips on disguising outlawed curls with eyebrow shading. Not military ones, but brass players from the Conservatoire. Now moonlighting as messengers for the Facial Liberation League. Each trumpet honk signals a coded location for that night-esque grooming gala. Underground meetings where mustachianers share grooming techniques. Poems, even interpretive dances meant to honor the spirit of personal expression. If they outlaw story, I'll whisper sculpture. Everyone suspects everyone else. It's oddly thrilling. If you attend one in the catacombs, it's theatrical. Stall street-length measuring tapes. Introduce random follicle inspections. Rumors swirl that a national razor registry is being drafted. Lifting his monocle and adjusting a luscious, carefully groomed, very illegal mustache. A graffiti tag beneath it reads, "This is not a mustache, it's a sentence." There's a tangible sense of unity. Children start drawing them on their dolls. Bakers mold into mustache shapes. Horses spotted with braided reins shaped like handlebars. Lions on fountains now boast twirled whiskers. Stone busts of philosophers sport slap-on soul patches. Someone has even given the statue of Louis XIV an ironic chin-strap beard. The guards try to scrub them, but they reappear, bolder, sharper, more audacious. That's for revolutions with louder headlines. It simmers. It curls. It spreads one whisper at a time. A few days later, you're invited to the launch of the first facial-style zine, Lip Service. He says nothing, just stands there. It's brilliant. But from your view on the cafe terrace, it's undeniable. The people are not afraid of their faces anymore. Each page a mosaic of sketches, satire, and style tips. Stroke of the comb, a defiance. Each trimmed edge, a reminder that your face is your own territory. You read a feature interview with a masked artist, only known as the Barbarian. He allegedly sculpts portraits into his clients' sideburns. One quote stands out. "If they outlaw shape, I'll sculpt story." One senior advisor is caught in a salon in Saint-Germain, des-PR, requesting a little rebellion with a side of wax. Another begins slipping pro-mustache verses into economic reports. When pressed, he claims he's just testing literacy. No one knows who he is, even more bizarre. The rise of facial graffiti. You pass alleyways now adorned with paste-up art of mustaches on architecture. You stop to admire one. Meanwhile, tension spikes within the ministry. Some officials want to double down, but others begin to crack. And then the scandal. One cold morning, you read the headline in Le Figaro, "Minister's secret mustache exposed in Opera House debacle." Photos surface grainy, but unmistakably, love the Minister of Urban Harmony in a private opera box. The public reaction, explosive. Even people with no facial hair join in, hoisting paper mustaches in solidarity. You watch the city transform again, this time, not from fear, but from fire. Not literal fire, of course. This one, historians still debate whether this was the moment the regime truly lost its grip. You sip your coffee slowly. Across the square, a child draws a mustache in the fogged glass of a shop window. Mother doesn't scold her. She smiles. The next day, a man walks into the ministry, wearing a coat lined entirely with clipped mustache shapes, each one sewn by a different artisan. Eventually, someone offers him tea. Even in silence, something changes. And so the movement gathers not just momentum, but texture. Your own grooming now feels less like a ritual and more like a meditation. You tuck a copy of Lip Service into your coat, tip your hat slightly askew, and walk back out into a city humming with rebellion. Not loud, just insistent. Just enough. It begins with rain. It's not the dramatic kind that turns cobblestones into mirrors and poets into puddles, but the drizzly, decisive sort that Paris specializes in when it's feeling passive-aggressive. You're standing beneath the awning of a bakery, trying to decide if the weather is telling you to go home or buy another croissant. You choose the croissant. The walls are plastered with enlarged diagrams, acceptable widths, curvature guidelines, chin proximity charts. He's nervous but proud, recounting how he once styled a client's mustache into the shape of a revolutionary torch. One chart is simply titled Mustache or Menace, and it features several red arrows and a suspiciously angry goose. A decision that bizarrely leads you to a public tribunal about mustache width enforcement. She argues that her product merely encourages self-love and perhaps a bit of arch mischief, because of course it does. The tribunal is being held in a converted ballroom, once a place for minuet and mild flirtation, lined with velvet ropes and stern-faced attendees clutching copies of grooming bylaws. Her name was Matilda. She became a minor icon. There's no official judge, just gathered onlookers and the occasional street poet who narrates with phrases like, "Behold the sweep of rebellion upon his lip." His opponent reveals a miniature bridge, complete with ink-drawn carriages and a seagull. What's certain is that their proceedings became increasingly theatrical. One day it's a citizen accused of facial asymmetry, intended to mock the crown. The next, it's a goat dressed as a bureaucrat, paraded in protest by students from the École des Beaux-Arts. You slide into a creaky seat just as the first witness takes the stand. A barber named Gilm, whose salon was raided for unauthorized curl direction. Not for vanity, but for awareness. Your mustache is growing more expressive. You swear it twitched during an argument with your landlady. Gasps echo through the chamber. Then comes a merchant whose perfumed wax has been accused of inciting follicular arrogance. A baker sues the city after his sourdough is classified as subversive, due to its crust as resemblance to handlebars. He wins. The ruling reads, "Entry is by whisper only." Exhibits include wax sculptures, folktales embroidered on handkerchiefs, and a life-size mannequin of Louis XIV reimagined with a punk rock soul patch. The judges whisper. The Prussians pretend not to be fascinated. Each lantern bears the name of a banned mustache style. You watch the monarch sweep float beside the streetcar flare. Historians still argue whether these tribunals were genuine legal experiments or elaborate distractions to placate the masses. These are quiet competitions of style and nerve. That goat? It's not for any law passed or decree revoked, but for the collective sigh of people no longer afraid to decorate their defiance. Everyone wears elaborately styled facial hair, and those without any naturally. Charcoal, yarn, licorice creativity reigns. And amidst all this farce, something more intimate begins happening across the city. The birth of mustache duels. No, not violent ones. Their final public campaign, "Smooth is safe," is quietly mocked into extinction. Someone changes every poster to read, "Smooth is suspicious." The public agrees. A boat floats by, its prow shaped into a flamboyant mustache. Two people meet in a public square. Each reveals their facial creation slowly, like fencers drawing blades. No one stops them. In fact, tourists start lining up to pose. Go. You witness one duel where a man's mustache is shaped into the skyline of Montmartre. You go. It's haunting. You dream about it later, and wake with a strange respect for mimikind. No one wins. Everyone claps. You begin carrying a small mirror, she noticed. Now she nods at you differently, warily, respectfully, somewhere between salons and salons. Underground museum opens de la Mustache Moderne. You stand before a sculpture made entirely of discarded razors, twisted into a spiral that narrows into a single perfect curl. The plaque reads, "Control may shave the surface, but never the root." Meanwhile, the government starts losing battles in stranger ways. Bread shall not be held responsible for beauty. The tribunal disbands quietly the next day. At this point, even foreign dignitaries are catching wind of Paris's furry little rebellion. The British send observers. The Spanish send oils infused with mustaches strengthening herbs. You find yourself invited to a rooftop event above the Sorbonne. La Nuit des Narines Libres. The night of free nostrils. There's music, dancing. A woman with a violin shaped like a grooming comb plays a haunting tune called La Frange Inoubliable. Halfway through, someone releases paper lanterns into the sky. They burn slowly, rising. You feel oddly moved. Historians still debate the turning point, but many point to this night. Back on the streets, you notice something. No more measuring tapes. No more inspectors with clipboards and pompous mustache envy. The posters are gone, replaced by flyers for theater shows with names like The Man Who Waxed Too Close to the Sun and Mr. Whiskers. Whirlwind Review. One show advertises a mime with a mustache that dances independently of his face. Even the ministry seems to have accepted quiet defeat. By now, even the pigeons of Paris are more mustachioed. Someone has been carefully attaching tiny mustaches to statues of birds. You lean against a bridge one evening, watching the Seine. You laugh softly. The rain returns, polite this time, just enough to slick the streets with reflection. Your reflection. And in it, your face, your mustache, your resistance. Small, perhaps, but perfectly measured. By now, your morning ritual is practically sacred. It's a splash of cold water, a tilt of the mirror. And then your toolkit, a comb shaped like a miniature harpsichord. Wax that smells faintly of clove and revolution. And a tiny brush gifted to you by an old painter who once whispered, "The lip is a canvas too." Each day, you sculpt your mustache with more care than the day before, not out of vanity but memory. Of tribunals and duels, of lanterns and violinists, and of that night when the air tasted like freedom and pine tar, and you're not alone. People lean in with expressions so nuanced, so finely curled, they might as well be speaking Morse code with their upper lips. Others are geometric, with lines so sharp you could dice onions on them. A few are minimalist masterpieces, a single confident stroke of hair like an artist's signature on a blank page. All over Paris, mustaches now speak before mouths do. Some mustaches are wild, defiant sprays, like wind-blown grass. The city has become a living gallery, and every face is an exhibit. It sells bespoke mustache experiences. You can order a style named after your childhood trauma, the heartbreak twist, the dad never hugged me handlebar, the art school disillusionment droop, and then inevitably someone tries to monetize it. A new boutique opens in La Mer called Chez Les Poils. She peers at your upper lip like a cartographer discovering a new continent. "You have a melancholic arch," she says softly. "We'll lean into that." She doesn't love it, but she wears it with stoic pride. You roll your eyes, but you also book an appointment. The stylist greets you with the gravity of a surgeon. She begins shaping their fur into facial hair, patterns some with tight French curls, others with what she calls the bourbon bristle. 1 hour later, you emerge with something elegant, sorrowful, bold. Judges evaluate them on flair, poise, and historical references. Because once something becomes a game, once it becomes silly, it can never truly be caged. The winning dog's mustache is a perfect replica of Voltaire's. People nod at you in the street. You nod back. Historians still argue whether this commercialization was inevitable or a betrayal. One camp calls it the flattening of resistance. The other argues that evolution is the only true form of rebellion. It's not just any mustache, but one from the ban list. The seditious swoop. Students argue passionately about whether side whiskers constitute cheating. One thesis claims that dual-tone grooming is a response to post-feudal disillusionment. You aren't sure? But you do notice something else. Children are beginning to participate, not with real mustaches, of course, but drawn-in ones. In chalk, in jam, in the steam on a window pane. It's become a form of play, a rite of passage. Even your neighbor's cat has been seen wearing a sticker mustache. And speaking of pets, let's talk about the Great Canine Incident. It begins with a bored groomer in Montparnasse who decides that poodles deserve dignity too. It escalates. On mirrors. On envelopes. A former regulator known only as Inspector Lefebvre publishes a memoir titled Wax and Wane. In it, he confesses that the entire time he was issuing fines and calibrating mustache gauges, he secretly longed to grow his own. One bold soul tattoos it on their cheek. Within weeks, there's a full-blown salon de mustaches canines in the Tuileries Gardens. De poodles, bulldogs, greyhounds, each paraded with a flourish. Folded into hat bands, slipped under doors, tied to cafe chairs. It reads, "He pees on the award podium, the crowd roars." It sits softly unassuming, contemplative, no title, no credit. This is the absurdity of it all. It's what makes the movement lovable, human, and impossible to legislate again. You walk past the statue of one afternoon and see someone has perched a fake mustache on him. No one removes it. Days pass. It becomes permanent. Even the wind seems to curl differently now. At the Sorbonne, a guest lecture titled Lip as Text. Semiotics of the subnasal statement draws standing room only crowds. You sip a coffee and smile. You remember when all of this was whispers and caution and chalk marks in alleyways. Now it's poetry. Now it's syllabus. And then something even stranger happens. An anonymous pamphlet appears across Paris. They tried to make us silent, so we spoke in hair. Below it, a single curl drawn in ink. Just the curl. People began replicating it on walls. Becomes the symbol of a city's quiet roar. The final blow to enforcement comes from within. It includes a sketch of what it would have looked like. It's beautiful. The book becomes a bestseller. And slowly, Paris forgets the exact moment when enforcement ended, because what matters more is that no one obeys it anymore. Not even out of defiance. Just indifference. You stroll home one evening, pausing at your reflection in a bakery window. You smile. Your mustache is relaxed today, like it's remembering something. Maybe you are too. One morning, not long after the last fine is ever issued, you're sitting in the park with a warm croissant and a lukewarm sense of peace. A pair of pigeons strut by, one of them with what appears to be a tiny strip of dark thread stuck above its beak. You chuckle. Even the birds, it seems, want to be part of the myth now. Theirs is a version filled with plot holes and far too many dance numbers, but the spirit is there. Across the lawn, a group of children are reenacting the trial of the Handlebar Seven, complete with powdered wigs made from cotton balls and dramatic monologues lifted from last year's viral puppet show. And perhaps that's the point. The movement, which began with bureaucratic whimsy and escalated into absurd cultural warfare, has now become legend. It's bedtime story material, something people argue about over cheap red wine and honey-drizzled bread. And when tourists ask what really happened, why there are mustache-shaped plaques embedded in the sidewalks, or why the National Archives hold a leather bound facial ordnance log under glass, you lean back and sigh, far messier. Some suggest the mustache wars were merely a reflection of the deeper tensions of the Enlightenment-era, the tension between order and expression, between measurement and mystery, more human and honestly more fun. Well, you say, it all began when a few people decided their lips deserved freedom. That's the sanitized version, the real one. Historians still argue whether the entire thing was a protest, a prank, or performance art gone rogue. She now runs a pop-up street salon where she gives people their emotional grooming profile. Others believe it was all just an elaborate excuse to finally grow out that wavy monstrosity they'd have been hiding from their in-laws. And somewhere in the middle of those theories lives the truth. It was a moment. A wing dedicated to facial hair in art, politics, and philosophy. They plan to include mirrors, wax samples, even a groomer-owned Caravaggio display. A lovely, tangled, ridiculous moment when Paris looked at its own reflection and burst out laughing, because laughter, you've realized, is also a form of resistance. And so is softness. And so is the choice to do something just because it feels right. Take old Madame Belay, for instance. The former records clerk who for years kept a strict log of unlawful facial configurations. Her specialty? The melancholy chevron. She says it's for people who survived both revolution and really bad dates. There are even whispers that the Louvre is considering a new exhibit à deux mustache. You plan to go? Not out of nostalgia, but out of quiet curiosity. Because what started as an attempt to control has evolved into a study of the uncontrollable. Expression, humor, the ways people insist on being just a little bit weird even when told not to. The sky above Paris glows with the kind of soft orange that artists always overdo on postcards. You've learned over all these years that fashion is never just about fabric or follicles. It's a message, sometimes subtle, sometimes loud. The world narrows to the gentle hush of night sounds, a creaking floorboard. The muted trill of crickets, the whisper of wind against glass. Always personal. And in that sense, the Great Mustache Regulation was never really about mustaches. It was about the space above your lip. That little patch of skin where the world ends and your words begin. You reach for your coffee, now lukewarm. Your thoughts drowsy and curling inward drift like mustaches on sleepy faces and forgotten portraits. Your mustache curls slightly in the breeze. Just enough to say, I'm still here. So are you. And now, as the city fades into velvet shadows and the last birds trade gossip beneath the eaves, You let your breath soften. The candlelight flickers on your bedside table. You sink deeper into the quiet, like a feather drifting onto warm linen. There's nothing left to decide, no rules to measure, no symmetry to maintain. Only the softness of your blanket, the steady rhythm of your breath, and the fading memory of a time when Paris grew tired of precision and chose poetry instead. Let that stay with you now. Let the details melt away like wax in a forgotten lamp. Your eyelids are heavier than debate. Let them rest. Let yourself rest. Everything is quiet now, and that little patch of skin above your lip is still free.